Hey, thanks for tuning in. Today, we're going to talk about something pretty powerful, a plan to build financial independence. And I'm not talking about waiting 30 years. I'm talking about doing it in just 1 decade. We're going to break it all down step by step, showing you how to build a real passive income stream with dividend investing, even if you're starting with literally nothing in your account. All right, let me ask you something. Imagine it's 10 years from today. You wake up, you roll over, you check your phone, and boom, another 3 grand just landed in your account, just like it did last month and the month before that. And you didn't have to go to work for it. Sounds like a pipe dream, right? Well, it's not. And we're about to get into the nuts and bolts of how it actually works. Okay, so this is where we have to kind of rewire our brains. The old way of thinking about retirement, the way our parents did it, was all about saving up this massive pile of money. We're talking close to $1 million, and then slowly, piece by piece, selling it off to live. It's stressful, but dividend investing, it totally flips that on its head. The goal isn't to build a pile of cash you have to destroy. No, the goal is to build an income engine, a machine that just keeps paying you forever without you ever having to sell the machine itself. Now, to make this super clear, let's follow a real-world example. We'll call him Harry. And Harry's story is probably pretty relatable. A few years back, he had zip, zero, nada in his investment account. He was looking at the calendar and doing that depressing math, realizing he'd be working until he was 67. And he just said, nope, not for me. He decided to completely reject that timeline and build his own freedom fund instead. So what was his secret weapon? It's this idea of a dividend machine. And this is so important. We all hear about compound interest, right? Well, this is even better. This is compound income. Think about it. Every single dividend payment that comes in, it's used to buy more shares. And what do those new shares do? They pay you even more dividends. It starts out as this tiny little snowball. You can barely see it rolling, but give it time and it becomes a massive, unstoppable avalanche of income. And you can see right here how that little snowball gets started. Harry kicked things off with a really solid foundational ETF called SCHD. He was just putting in $500 a month. And look, after 2 full years, he was only making about $450 a year in dividends. Now, let's be honest, this is the exact point where most people throw in the towel. They'd say, this is taking forever. It's not working. But Harry knew better. He knew these first few years weren't about getting rich. They were about patiently building the foundation of his machine, 1 gear at a time. All right, so the foundation is built. Now what? Well, Harry didn't just stick with the same old plan. That would have been too slow. Instead, he started strategically adding new parts to his machine, parts specifically designed to make the whole thing run faster and smoother. And this, my friends, is where things really start to take off. He used something called a barbell strategy. It's a really smart approach. On one side of the barbell, you've got your safe, stable, reliable stuff. ETFs like SCHD for steady dividend growth and VNQ for real estate income. Think of this as the heavy, dependable engine of the portfolio. But on the other side of the barbell, he added some high-octane rocket fuel, an ETF called DIIV. Its whole job was to be a massive yield accelerator, to pour gasoline on the fire and supercharge his income. And I mean, just look at the results. It's wild. Remember that kind of sad-looking $450 he was making after year 2? Well, by bringing in those other parts and just staying the course, that income literally exploded. By the end of year 5, it was almost $5,000 a year. That is what the acceleration phase looks like. It's a game changer. But let's put that into perspective, right? $4,800 a year. What does that actually mean? Well, that's $400 a month. Every single month. That's not abstract, that's real. That's enough to cover your groceries for the month, or a car payment. But you know what's even more powerful? It's enough money to pour right back into the machine, making that snowball grow even bigger, even faster. This is that magic moment, the tipping point, where the machine really starts to fuel its own growth. Okay, but the barbell strategy wasn't the end of the story. To really make this thing bulletproof for the long haul, Harry added 2 final pieces to the puzzle. He wanted a complete, balanced 5 ETF portfolio. The final version of his machine was designed for the perfect mix of rock-solid stability, that high-yield income we talked about, and just a little sprinkle of growth potential on top. And here it is, the complete blueprint. You can see how it's all put together. The biggest chunks are still that stable core, SCHD and VNQ, but he's also got a pretty big slice dedicated to that accelerator, DIV. And then you see these smaller, more strategic positions for the final 2 ETFs, NOBL and NUDV. And this is where you can see how every single piece has a specific job. SCHD, that's your solid core. VNQ adds that crucial real estate diversification. DIV, we know that's the accelerator. Then you've got NOBL. Now this one's cool. It's full of dividend aristocrats, companies that have raised their dividends for over 25 straight years. Think of that as your portfolio's insurance policy. And finally, NUDV is the wild card, a smaller bet on a fund that's chasing a little more growth. Okay, let's hit the pause button for a second and get real, because this kind of thing doesn't just happen by magic. There's no secret button you press. So we need to talk about the tactics Harry used that weren't obvious, the sacrifices he had to make, and yeah, the very real risks that come with a plan like this. All right, so here's one of his biggest secrets to speeding things up. Most people just set their dividends to automatically reinvest, right? Drip. Well, Harry didn't do that. Instead, he let all his dividend payments pile up as cash in his account. And then he waited. He waited for the market to have a bad day or for one of his favorite ETFs to go on sale, and then he'd pounce, deploying all that cash to buy more shares at a discount. This little trick, it's estimated it boosted his returns by a whopping 15% compared to just blindly reinvesting. But let's talk about the other side of this. This stuff doesn't happen without sacrifice. It just doesn't. This plan took serious discipline. We're talking about driving the same car for over 7 years, cooking at home instead of getting takeout all the time. Every time he got a raise or a bonus, straight into the machine. While his friends were out upgrading their lives, buying new stuff, he was quietly, consistently buying more income-producing assets. He made a conscious choice. Build actual wealth, don't just look wealthy. And of course, we've got to talk about the risks, because there are definitely risks. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. First off, dividends are not guaranteed. Companies can and sometimes do cut them. The market's going to crash. It's not a matter of if, but when. Real estate can be tricky with interest rates, and you absolutely have to think about taxes. So no, this isn't a risk-free path. Not at all. It's about understanding the risks and managing them smartly. But after looking at all those potential downsides, the market volatility, the dividend cuts, Harry came to a really powerful conclusion. He realized that none of those were the biggest risk he faced. The single biggest, most terrifying risk was doing nothing. Just letting another year and then another slip by without letting his money work for him. And that brings this whole thing back to you. We've walked through Harry's journey. We've seen the whole blueprint. But the most important thing to take away from all this is that your 10-year clock, well, it can start right now, today. The secret isn't about waiting for the perfect time or having the absolutely perfect strategy. The secret is just to start. It's about progress, not perfection. I want you to really let this sink in. The person who starts today with just $100 is almost guaranteed to end up ahead of the person who waits a year for the perfect time to invest $1,000. Why? Because the magic of compounding cares way more about time than it does about the amount of money. Starting small right now is so much more powerful than waiting to start big later. Because let's be real, later often becomes never. So it all comes down to this, a choice. The clock is ticking for all of us. 10 years from now, you're going to be 10 years older. That's a fact. The only question is, what will you have to show for it? Will you have a decade of results to look back on, or a decade of really good excuses for why you never got started? The choice is yours. What's it going to be?